Environmental Engineering and Technology at East Carolina Technical College. And this is Jeff Simons. I teach at USC Sumter Biology over there. And my name is like Canterbury Simons. You know we got either scientists or baseball players. And this was last year. We're in charge of a special topic again. And basically, just to give you a little bit of how we thought about organizing this, both in your coach's manual and in the presentation, we basically took most of the learning objectives that came down from the national and Envirothon, and basically used those, added a couple things and localized to South Carolina a little bit. And there are a couple things that we left in the student coach's manual that are in italics, let's say for national competition only. We're not going to go over those today. Those are mostly things that are specific to California for the national competition. And so if you make it that far, then you can delve into those individual topics. We'll be glad to help you. Yes, absolutely. So basically we're going to go through here with the PowerPoint and walk through some of those learning objectives and the highlights from this. So starting off with some basics, and some of this is going to overlap a little bit with what you just heard, some of the groundwater stuff. But again, hydrology overview, I think you saw even the same USGS figure in the last presentation, right? Most of you probably talked about this with your students at some point, but the basic water cycle. We're not going to go over that in detail. You've heard about it before. Although I always do like to point out this little piece over here about what's surprising even to my college students, how much of the world's water is actually surface water versus groundwater and fresh water. And only 3% is about fresh water. Of that, almost a little over 2/3 is found up in glaciers, which means only about a third of that 3% is left for groundwater and surface water, which is mostly what we're talking about here today. So it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the whole. The other part to now modify that, what you heard in the last presentation, what you all know about the basics of the water cycle. One of the questions they asked here is how is climate change going to affect that? So we've taken our basic water cycle and tried to point out some areas here where climate change may have an impact on this basic water cycle. So for example, if you have increased temperatures, right, that's going to lead to increased evaporation. Right, so warmer temperatures, more evaporation, that's going to be less water, either moving into groundwater, recharging aquifers, like we just heard about, right? That's going to mean less water available for lakes. Again, as the previous speaker talked about, there were droughts we had here, although those have been largely erased over the past couple of months. But if you're driving around parts of the state, last summer or last fall, you would see very, very calm down water conditions will exacerbate those sort of things. So again, just to touch on it here, so we'll talk about a little bit later. Less water in the aquifers and our reservoirs, lakes, and streams. That's going to mean less water for hydroelectricity and power generation and that sort of thing a little bit later. But if you have more water going up than evaporation, it's got to go somewhere. So again, climate change, it means climate's changing all over. All that water's got to go up somewhere in some areas. So some areas are going to get drier. Other areas, though, all that water's going up in evaporation. Areas where that water's going to come down are actually probably going to get a little wetter. So in some places, you're going to have areas with increased rainfall. Right? So some areas are actually going to have more rainfall, so you're going to have surplus of water. Other areas are going to have less water. The other part of this, particularly for water supply, is that increased temperatures for parts of the world, parts of the western United States, parts of Asia, and the Himalayas, those sorts of areas, right, depend on glacier snow melt for their water supply. A lot of those glaciers slowly start to melt. So what normally happens is, those glaciers shrink and grow a little bit every year. And in the warmer months, those glaciers slowly melt. That provides a nice steady supply of water for places further and lower elevations, right? That water goes down until they get a lot of drinking water supply. But as those glaciers melt, that steady supply is going to disappear. And so in the warmer summer months, they're not going to have that slow trickle moving down, and they're not going to be able to rely on that water supply. That's going to be less water slowly filling aquifers, less water recharging reservoirs, lakes in the summer. So that's going to be a problem for part of the world. So there's just a few ways that climate change is going to impact water supply.
entire thing here. So I'm going to have to weed this. A couple of the major pollutants that we want to talk about first is the nitrates. And what your students need to know is where the pollutants are coming from, how they're getting there, and what they're doing. So nitrates, does anybody know where the nitrates primarily get into the water system, into the groundwater? Fertilizers. And who wants to attempt to say the major problem, the major human effect of nitrates? No, that's really not the big one from nitrates. MTBE and perfluoroethane are definitely both carcinogenic, but nitrates, it's probably due. Just about everything, I guess, is carcinogenic.
Isn't it blue baby?
Yes, blue baby syndrome, but it's methemoglobinemia is what it's really called. I got all the syllables that methemoglobinemia. Fertilizers, blue baby syndrome. Essentially, what happens is the nitrates. There's a sweet on there. The nitrates get into the hemoglobin and prevent the bonding of oxygen, and skin doesn't get enough oxygen to dig through fluid. Perfluoroethylene is primarily from dry cleaning. Another good reason to wear a wash and wear. That's my excuse. That's why I look wrinkled all the time, because I refuse to put perfluoroethylene into the ecosystem. Again, that's a carcinogen. MTBE is an anti-knock agent found in gasoline. And if you ask the EPA, there's not sufficient evidence for MTBE. But if you ask California, and we know the standards came from California, it's California, so what else can you say about that? But if you ask California, it's a known carcinogen. And then there are several pathogens that you probably want to be aware of. Bucoliform destiny, Giardia, poliovirus. You should have access. We don't have this on the disc, but you've got the access to my blog, which should be in there. I'll put all this stuff on there with good links to all the different pathogens. And that's actually something fun for the students to look up, because for some reason, students like things that are out of the ordinary that cause disease. They like disease a lot. I'm really excited.